All right. Hello, everyone. This is Sumaya, the outreach coordinator from Minaret Foundation. In the Muslim community, generally, we're familiar with different religions, such as Christianity and Judaism, but we're not always as familiar with the different denominations of those religions, right? So we don't always know what the distinctions are between those different denominations. So the goal of the Faith 101 series is going to be to learn more about these denominations from personal perspectives of clergy members. So for this first edition of Faith 101, we're here with Reverend David Wantland from Palmer Memorial Episcopal Church. So hello, David. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. So I'm one of the priests here at Palmer. I've been here for 3 years. And Palmer, if you don't know where it is right where the Texas Medical Center, Rice University, and Herman Park all kind of converge and kiss each other. So there's this little sliver of land. And if you've ever been driving down Fannin or Main Street and you've seen this kind of pinkish Mediterranean building around there, usually with high schoolers smoking outside, so Palmer has been known in the community for a long time as the church that fed the homeless in the Texas Medical Center area. And then more recently has be known as the church where Archway Academy is housed. And Archway Academy is a high school for folks learning in a sober environment, trying to deal with substance abuse. So that's where I have been for the last 3 years. And I grew up in Texas, but not in Houston. So I'm from Dallas originally, and some people give me a hard time for that. But when I was ordained as a priest, and so didn't grow up in the Episcopal Church, and so I think I have a little bit of an outsider's perspective, although I'm certainly now very much a part of it. So really glad to be here and to share a little bit about this denominational home.
Okay. If you don't mind me asking, you said you didn't grow up in the Episcopal Church, so how did you end up working as a reverend in the Episcopal Church?
Yeah, it's a great question. I grew up in an evangelical, non-denominational church up in Dallas, but I grew up inside of a predominantly Roman Catholic family. So when I went to college, I was really interested in exploring the breadth of Christianity, and so I'd been really drawn to the more formal, ritualized expression of worship in the Catholic tradition. And so I actually started going to a Catholic church when I went to college and started the process to become a Roman Catholic. And then somewhere along the way, I think because I have 3 older sisters and I was really wrestling with the thought of what I would do if one of them felt called to ordain ministry. And as it stands now, the Roman Catholic Church does not have ordained women, deacons and priests and bishops. I stepped away from that process, and in doing so was invited by a friend to go to an Episcopal church. And what was so striking to me when I went to that church was it had all the meaning and the ritual and the tradition that I loved about the Catholic faith. And there right in front of me was a woman priest. And so I was able to kind of reconcile these different aspects of my own formation and conviction and practice faith. So as I became an Episcopalian in college, there started to be this wakening up for me that I might be called to ordain ministry. And so I pursued that with trusted mentors for several years, and then I went into the ordination process and came out the other end a priest.
Wow, that's amazing. So I had another question for you. So from my understanding, the Episcopalian and the Anglican churches are the same thing. Is that right?
Yeah. So the way I like to put it is that all Episcopal churches are Anglican churches. Not all Anglican churches are Episcopal churches.
Okay.
So as you probably know, Christianity is a very divided religion. Sadly, there are tons and tons of offshoots, different traditions. And most of those are grounded in different historical realities and political realities at play. So when we talk about Anglican, we're talking about the churches in the tradition of the Church of England. So the Church of England broke away from the Roman Catholic Church in the 16th century as a reform movement there. And then as England followed Spain and Portugal, in their colonial efforts, they took this Church of England with them. And so a lot of the churches throughout the world that use the word Anglican to describe themselves are churches frankly, in that colonial heritage and history. Some churches aren't, that doesn't really apply, but it's the kind of colonial lineage of this church. So as England spread across the world, the churches that belonged to that were Anglican. What happened through history is that as different countries gained independence from the British Empire, their churches changed. And so what happened here in the United States when the American colonies broke from England, it was that church that had been a part of the Church of England now had to make a decision, and it split from the Church of England and became what was then called the Protestant Episcopal Church. So here in the United States, if you are in an Episcopal church, you are a part of that global Anglican, what we call the Anglican Communion, that lineage and heritage of the Church of England. What's confusing is that there are also churches in the United States that self-describe as Anglican. So their name might be Holy Trinity Anglican Church. Mm-hmm. And do that is because they're still in that same tradition, that same stream of Anglicanism, but they're trying to distinguish themselves from the Episcopal Church, and that's for a lot of different reasons. So you might find a church, there's actually plenty of them here in the Houston area, in Sugar Land, Katy, the Heights, Pearland, I think, that are Anglican churches. We're all kind of swimming in the same water, but they're in a different boat than the Episcopal Church.
Okay. And you said there's a lot of different reasons they might want to distinguish themselves. I'm not expecting you to list them all, but could you give us like maybe a couple of reasons why they might want to distinguish themselves?
Yeah. So especially in the 20th century, there was a lot of transformation within Anglicanism in the United States. And each of those moments of transition, pretty much each of those moments of transition, we can see a split happening. So one was a big change to the way that we worship. We use a book called the Book of Common Prayer. That's what contains all of the rites, the prayers, the liturgies that we say and do collectively. And once during the 20th century, actually twice during the 20th century, that changed. And some churches felt that the Episcopal Church was moving away from the tradition we had inherited. And so they left and broke off. During the 70s, as the Episcopal Church was preparing to make room for women's ordained leadership, some Episcopal churches felt that was going against tradition and teaching, and so they broke away. And then something similar happened in the 21st century when the Episcopal Church decided to make moves in support of LGBTQ people in ordained leadership and same-sex marriage. And so when that happened, another subset of Episcopal churches left and created relationships with other Anglican churches.
Okay. Okay, wow. So when it comes to Episcopalian and Anglican churches generally, how are they different from, I know you mentioned like in the Catholic Church, women can't be priests, right? Other than that, what are some other distinctions between Episcopalianism and like Catholic or Protestants or any of these other denominations?
Yeah. So I always think it's helpful to point out the ways that we're similar, because the truth of the matter is that Christianity, though it is very diverse, we can fight with each other because we have so much shared language, shared belief, shared vocabulary, and that's why we rub up each other so profoundly. I think if we were too different, it'd be like we were passing in separate lanes. But so the things that we share across the Christian tradition is first that we believe that God is one. There is one God, but that God is three persons that we name Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We believe that Jesus of Nazareth is the second, the Son, in that triune God, and that Jesus came into the world as a human to live in a way that redeems all of creation. So Jesus healed, he preached a gospel of good news, and he invited people to follow him in this way. And then we believe Jesus died for the way that he lived, that people wanted him to be killed for what he was saying and doing, and then that God raised him from the dead. The Father raised him from the dead, and then Jesus actually bodily went to where the Father dwells, what we shorthandedly refer to as heaven. And we believe that Jesus is going to come back someday in the future, and all the world's dead will rise from the dead, and God will establish a kingdom of peace and of mercy and of love forever, for the whole world. And so the way that we live as Episcopalians is to bear witness to that reality, that we believe that Jesus has died, Jesus has risen, and that Jesus is going to come again. And we try to live like Jesus in the world, and then also point to this kingdom that we believe is coming toward us from the future. And I think it's safe to say that that is a shared theme across the Christian world. But there are definite distinctions in the way we practice our faith. I think a simple way to kind of ground how we gather is simply to, when we gather for worship or in community, we're doing it to retell the story of Jesus. It's just that the way that we do that might look different from other traditions. So like I said, we are inheritors of the Roman Catholic faith. And so a lot of the formality and the ritual and the things that we believe are central to practicing our faith look very similar to the Catholic Church. When it comes to on the ground what you're experiencing, you might notice if you were to open up the Holy Bible in
all right, David's breaking up just a little bit. We're having some technical difficulties. Let's give him a second.
Their stuff broke.
Okay, I think, David, you're clear again, but we missed the last maybe 30 seconds of what you said.
I'm sure it wasn't worth hearing anyway.
You were saying
closer to smoother.
Okay. You were saying that what we experience on the ground might be a little bit different.
Yeah, so the first thing we share with all Christians, the collection of sacred texts, of Holy Scripture, Bible. But the Bible that we use in the Episcopal Church contains different books than the Bibles of other Protestant denominations. So things that part of that we call canonical books, they're basically writings that are Greek, Hebrew, and so some Protestants decided to remove those from the Bible during the Protestant Reformation, and we kept on hold of those. So we still use those in worship. Mm-hmm. We are a sacramental tradition. So when we gather for worship, what we mean by that is that there are certain things that we believe God has left the church to give us grace for the journey, for the road ahead. And those things, the principal ones that we talk about are baptism and Eucharist, or Holy Communion, or the Lord's Supper. Now, all Christian traditions have baptism and Holy Eucharist, but not all Christian traditions practice them in the same way. And so the way that you would see in an Episcopal church is very formal. The space we're on, which is our side chapel for college services, the center piece of it is a giant table that we call the altar. And that's where we have this common meal together every Sunday. We believe that mysteriously, mystically, Jesus, who has gone to the place where God the Father lives, heaven, that somehow Jesus is with us fully present with us in this meal that we share.
That's amazing. And he's breaking up just a little bit again. So he was saying that they believe that Jesus is with them in this meal that they share.
That is not all Protestant denominations practice their faith in this way. And not
All right, we're having some more technical difficulties. Let's just give him just a minute to maybe change positions or get reconnected.
Well, I'm not quite sure what's going on here. The internet is apparently causing me some hard time.
It's all good. We were so good in the beginning. I don't know what happened in the middle. Okay. So we only have a couple of minutes left. Okay. All right. We only have a couple minutes left, so I'm just going to ask one more question, which is, what does being Episcopalian mean to you personally?
So what I love about being an Episcopalian is that it holds on to tradition of the church, expressions of Christianity way back until back in the first century, but it's constantly trying to pay attention to where God is leading us. And so that means that we have, as an Episcopal church, we've taken steps for what we believe is justice and the work of God, mercy in the world. And so that has meant things like including women's ordination, making space for LGBTQ people for full inclusion in our denomination. And I think this has not always been the case, especially in the last 30 years, really trying to reckon with our racial history and our past. It's hard to be talking about the Episcopal Church and not be thinking about George Floyd's funeral going on just across town. The Episcopal Church has been tied to white power for a large part of its history. And I think there's a real concerted movement right now, born of a sense that is where God is leading us, to reckon with that, to confess it, and to try to actively pursue dismantling the ways that we've participated in and been privileged by it.
Wow, that's an amazing reason to.
It's beautiful, and it's yeah.
That's amazing. All right. Thank you so much, David, for talking to us and being a part of this first edition of our Faith 101 series. I'm looking forward to meeting more people just like you and learning about other denominations. Thank you so much again for joining us. In the future, Faith 101 will always be a 20-minute interview. If anyone has any questions, y'all can feel free to write those down and we'll see if we can get back to you. Thank you again, David, for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.